Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Now, yesterday Mario Draghi rejected suggestions that Cyprus or any other country might give up the euro or be better off if they did. However, he failed to indicate what the central bank might do to stimulate struggling Eurozone economies. Joining me in the studio is Gero Jung from Mirabaud. Gero, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Now, we're going to discuss Cyprus. I think the problems there have been bubbling under the surface for quite some time, but the situation has just come to a head now. I think the question on a lot of people's lips is, why has the crisis erupted at this particular point?
Yes, the most immediate threat really was the ECB threatening to cut off the second largest bank, Popular Bank of Cyprus, also known as Laiki Bank, from its emergency liquidity assistance, from its financing operations by the end of March, unless a rescue package is done for Cyprus. And this really triggered the urgency in solving the problem in Cyprus. Now, it is true that the overall problem in the banking system in Cyprus is very much relevant. For instance, when we look at non-performing loans as compared to their own funds, this ratio of NPL stands at around 120%. This is a very high number and underlines the need for the banking sector to be saved, basically. Just as a matter of comparison, Greek banks in 2011 had a ratio of NPL, so their own funds, of about 66%, so much less than Cyprus banks have had now. Now, it is also true that the problem is not new. Actually, Cyprus lost market access, the government of Cyprus lost market access in 2011. So it is true that the problem is not new, but the urgency really came from the ECB threatening to cut off basically the Cyprus banking system from funding.
Okay, Gero, but if we take in terms of size, Cyprus isn't a huge country when you look at perhaps the GDP figures. So therefore, why is it such a huge backlash at the moment? Why is it so important?
Now, it is true that Cyprus is, relatively speaking, a small economy. Cyprus represents about 0.2% of economic activity of the overall Eurozone, so it is small. However, the help needed for Cyprus is large. It's about 17 billion euros, which represents around 100% of Cyprus GDP. So relatively speaking, the help needed is large. Now, what can be done? Cyprus, the government of Cyprus basically does not have the resources to help its banking system because debt levels are already high. Government debt to GDP stands at around 85%. Now, helping these banks, bailing them out, would increase this ratio to around 150% of GDP, which is unsustainable. Now, the Troika has offered help. It is likely that around 10 billion euros will come from the Troika and 7 billion euros need to come from Cyprus itself. Now, how are they going to do this? The plan is basically that a small amount will come from privatization receipts, around 1.2 billion euros. The rest, we're talking about roughly 6 billion euros, will come from a levy on the domestic banking system. Now, as you know, and as we show on this graph here, the Cyprus banking system is large. Deposits stand at around 68 billion euros. So compared to its economy, as we show here, to GDP, it is very large. Only the two largest banks represent around 400% of GDP. Now, how is that help going to be attributed? A levy will be taken on banks. Deposits in the banking system that are above 100,000 euros will be taxed. Now, these overall deposits are estimated at around 32 billion euros, and a levy will be taken on this amount.
Now, as with any crisis, contagion worries are rife at the moment. What is your thoughts about it spreading to the rest of Europe?
Now, since Cyprus is a relatively small economy, the problem is not really lies not really with Cyprus itself, it's really the contagion effect on other countries. So the problem really is a deposit run that could be transferred in other countries. The main message that one can take from the Cyprus case is that hypothetically €1 in a Cyprus bank is not worth the same amount than €1 in a German bank, and that clearly has some effects on deposit runs or more generally on bank runs.
Okay, so taking everything into consideration that we've discussed, how has this affected the Eurozone? Has it jeopardised its future beyond repair, do you think?
I think, first of all, one can say that a taboo has been broken. More generally, however, what is also true is that overall deposits in the Eurozone amount to about 8 trillion euros, whereas when you compare that to annual government revenues in the Eurozone, that's about 4.5 trillion euros, so roughly speaking, one half. So just mathematically, it is not possible to really fully insure deposits in the Eurozone. That is a more broader picture. I think there are four reasons, really, or we think there are four reasons why the impact will be limited. The first reason is that the exposure of European banks to the Cypriot banking system are relatively limited. It's about 20 billion euros. Just to give you an example, in Greece, European banks were exposed at around 120 billion euros. A second reason is that banks in other peripheral countries are much better capitalized now, especially now compared to 2 or 1 year ago. The third reason is the OMT by the ECB, which is an informal agreement or informal cap on effective borrowing rates in peripheral countries, in countries in difficulty. The fourth reason really is the very unique funding structure of banks in Cyprus. That is not the case in other European countries. However, we obviously focus very much on what is going on in peripheral economies. Now, the good news is, for instance, until now, there have been no major withdrawals in other weak Eurozone economies. For instance, it is a comfort to see that the Bank of Spain said that withdrawals so far because of Cyprus have been relatively limited. What must also be underlined is that the gravest damage really is done to the Cyprus economy. For instance, the European Commission itself thinks that in 2013 the Cyprus economy will see a contraction of around 3.5%. We think this is wishful thinking. It is very likely that the recession will be much deeper in Cyprus because of the decisions taken. It is our very strong conviction that the Eurozone will stick together. Now, it is true, however, that credibility has taken a hit. The whole credibility of the Eurozone relies on the idea that the common currency is irreversible. Now, this credibility for sure has taken a hit. However, we do think that the Eurozone will stick together. We do think that both areas, core economies as well as peripheral economies, know the advantages of remaining in the Eurozone. I think the main principle is really that it is much better to identify a devil and live with him rather than live with a devil that you do not know, which would be leaving the Eurozone, which would result in total chaos, economic and political. Now, the reasons for staying in the Eurozone are really political and economical. It is also true for the core economies. They have a very high interest of staying in the Eurozone. For instance, German banks have an exposure of around 400 billion euros to peripheral economies. So both core and peripheral economies have very high interest of remaining in the Eurozone. I think longer term, medium term to longer term, the problem really is that all members will feel like living in a loveless marriage. They will stick together because the costs of breaking up are too high. We think this is really a medium-term risk that we have to take into consideration.
Gero, thank you very much for your insights and for your very interesting analogies there. Better the devil you know. It does sound quite apt for the Eurozone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that's all from Gero and myself. The trading week has come to a close, but the TV team will be back with you on Monday, so please do tune back in then. Bye for now.